Welcome to Maxim EQ, where we explore the commonsensical through individual interpretation. At a time when the profound is too often reduced to cheap memes and goofy bumper stickers, we head in the opposite direction, digging deeper to examine the commonalities and the differences in our perceptions around particular adages. In each episode, we'll discuss our guest take on a thought-provoking maxim designed to promote self-reflection and personal growth for us, but hopefully for you as well. Today, we thought we would take a few minutes to reflect on how we arrived at doing this creative project together, and perhaps unpack why. Our hopes are, after this little introduction, you may just feel curious enough to join us for future episodes as we welcome the thoughts and ideas of some pretty interesting folks, most of whom we consider close friends and colleagues, and certainly from all walks of life. Thanks for being here. Stay tuned for a bit. We hope you enjoy the conversation. Now, Maxim EQ with Sam Wall and Mike Baumer. So, hey, man, good morning.
Hi, Sam.
Yeah, Maxim EQ. Here we
I
are.
feel like we're bundled up for our respective winter realities.
Indeed. It is really not pleasant outside right now, to say the least.
Yeah.
So, I really just want to start by sharing with our listeners, who we are and how we know each other and why we're here doing this. And I'm just going to start by kind of sharing with whoever's listening that, you and I met back in, it's probably 94, I'm guessing, in Boston,
right.
Massachusetts, Boston. Yeah. And we were both playing or singing in respective, rock bands at the time. We were in the scene. And I remember, I think the first time I met you was probably either at a City This show, prior to them being called Expanding Man.
Sure.
And that would have been probably my band opening for them at like Great Scots or something ridiculous like that.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Or it could have been that we really came to know each other better because we were neighbors living in the Alston neighborhood. And you shared a house with some droogs that I knew, and I shared a house with some droogs that you knew, and so it was a cool time. We were young men. We were playing in rock and roll bands. We were kind of all batting for the fences as individuals and trying to make something of our lives. And for me, I just want to share this up front, like, one of the things that that attracted me to you as a human out of the gate was like, I feel like every time you and I and Chris, I remember some long, like, of course there was always a little scotch present or something we were sipping on, but like I remember some evenings because we were all broke ass musicians and you guys were, I remember, working at a restaurant together or whatever, but I just remember some like late nights where we would just sit up and just tear shit down, you know what I mean? Like, and it just kind of came naturally to us. We would get going in conversation, and I feel like our whole relationship has been like that. Like every time you and I get together, it's like, oh, clear the calendar. We're gonna talk until the cows come home,
Yeah.
And I just love that about you, and I've always leaned on you like that as a friend, and it's just meant the world to me. And now, nearly 30 years later, or however long it is, 30 years later.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's still important to me. And I dare I say, you're one of my best friends, lifelong. So for me, it felt really natural to hit record and just kind of start documenting like what you and I do.
Yeah.
And so if you wouldn't mind kind of sharing with our listeners a little bit about like kind of how we arrived at the Maxim EQ idea, because it really was your idea. That'd be great.
Yeah, thanks. All of that great recollection for openers. And I certainly recall some of those late night conversations. I think that you probably recognized some of those qualities before I've even been aware of them, right? In terms of getting into these long form, engaging, stimulating conversations. And it always came really naturally to me. And I just kind of assumed that everybody did that. And it wasn't until many years later that I could even bring myself to acknowledge that, for fear of sounding pretentious, might actually be exceptional, or at the very least, not just be the norm. I just assumed it was, right? Because doesn't everybody just do that with everybody? And so it's just really weird that, reflecting on some of that, there have been these very consistent patterns in my life. And one of them was I'd have these conversations with people, or we'd be reviewing some situation in their life or some situation in my life. And I'd hear this phrase a lot. Oh, I never really thought of it that way. I'm like, okay. And I just assume that every conversation that somebody's having is revealing, something like that. And I guess maybe that's not always the case. And I started realizing recently that when something fairly commonsensical kind of hits you at the right time and resonates with you at the right time, it could have been delivered in some other form, in some book, in some song, in some movie. But there's something about being ready to receive it and the delivery method that it came in that has been really valuable to me lately. A really good example of that is whether it's Tim Ferriss, which I know is a podcast that you and I both like, and some of the guests that he has, or whether it's Tetragrammaton from Rick Rubin that I really like. I would find myself pausing pretty regularly on these individual statements that would just come out over these long form conversations that I really wanted to unpack, and then see if there was any applicable relevance to them in my life, whether it was something that I could relate to in my past, or more constructively, something that I'm trying to work on going forward. And if unpacking it might help me see things from a different point of view to contribute to a growth effort. I found myself doing that a lot.
Sure. So, I mean, just to extrapolate here, what I hear you saying, and I think that we share this observation in common, and that is that we're in a time now where, as a society, we're experiencing an exchange of ideas and information at a much higher speed. Information is flowing almost irrationally fast via social media, via mass media. I mean, whatever else, And so, we find ourselves in this mode of acronym. We find ourselves in this mode of adage and quips, and, everything's reduced, which really compresses and reduces the value of our language so often. And I know that you're a guy who always wants to hit the pause button and be like, hold on a second, let's unpack that for a minute.
Which the irony in that is I love the exercise of trying to refine something down to its essence. In my work life, despite the rambling, in my written life, right? And so I actually like that to a degree, as long as it's not trivializing and cheap and that kind of thing. But
you like the efficiency.
I love the efficiency of it, right? But at the same time, what's interesting to me is that even in the course of a long form conversation, like the podcast that we like listening to, I'm still finding pieces of it that I feel would benefit from pausing and unpacking. I still felt like there were so many moments of density in them that we could have just paused right there and then just talked about that for the remaining time if they wanted to go deeper. And so to me, each one of these episodes that we're recording with a guest feels like an opportunity to just start from that.
100%.
Right? Just start from that. And if we ended up going somewhere else and bringing some other themes into it, fine, but we're starting from a launching point that you and I feel like the subject matter is worthy of diving deeper with having three different people's points of view, bringing that to the conversation that gives us all something to riff off of. And then you and I were reconnecting in the form of having these really stimulating, enjoyable conversations, which is definitely something I've always loved about you and our relationship. The enthusiasm and the passion that you bring to everything that you engage in just seemed like a really good opportunity to work on a creative project together and do it in this form. Not just because podcasts are all the rage and everyone's got one, but it's like you brought this idea. Hey, let's just start hitting record on these conversations that we're having, because I think they're pretty interesting. And I think there's some substantive stuff that could be beneficial to other people listening. And then to tie it all in together, that's where the marriage of the two things came together, I think, of kind of like this idea that had been percolating in my head. And one of the components of that was really to bring other people into the fold. And so I think it was born that, hey, well, let's just pick a theme, an adage, a maxim, a saying that has enough meat on its bone that would support a three-way conversation for a half hour, hour. And we'll go from there and see what happens. And hopefully our listeners may have their own takeaways from it. And really, that's the goal. It's not about us necessarily puking our points of view onto someone else. It's in hopes that something that we touch on may have a similar effect to what I've benefited from listening to other conversations. And to your point, as you pointed out, wanting to hit the pause button and just give it some additional consideration for a little while.
Yeah, amen. So a couple things. We definitely came up with the idea of inviting a third guest into our discussions, specifically to add a new layer of subjectivity to our conversations, because you and I have been doing this for so long, and it was, definitely think necessary for us to decide to invite a third person to save us from ourselves and to and to bring another perspective, which I think is great. Also, I just want to mention, for me, just in general terms, kind of where I'm at in my life, like an amalgamation of contexts here, of paradigms here, my work world, my professional engagement with the world is that of a realtor, and I serve people, I serve clients, and in a pursuit toward getting better at that, and toward making that kind of my own curation, I have learned a lot from masterful sales people in the real estate industry, that there is a huge emphasis on making authentic relationships. And part of making authentic relationships, in order to give integrity to your business, is listening and really truly engaging with people with an open heart and with real authentic curiosity.
I love it. So do you see this, and especially bringing our guests into it, as an opportunity to continue to build that skill?
100%. And yeah. I have literally adopted that into my personal life too, just to bring value to my personal life, just the practice of becoming better at being in a mode all the time of curiousness, being in a mode of wonder and slowing down and making space for the answers to arrive. You know what I mean? And being in a listening mode. And it's just changed so much for me, and so it really connected with me personally when you brought this idea up. I thought that's consistent with who I am and who I want to be.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah,
that's great.
And so I live now in this constant state of practicum with this modality in my heart and in my mind, since we started doing this, which is great. I think that also, just as a society, I just want to mention this, there's a lot of paradigm shift happening in our society, and so many extreme trajectories of new awareness, and folks are beginning to break up a little bit with sponsored media, mass media.
Mm-hmm.
Folks are starting to break up a little bit with elected politicians, realizing that there's just way too much programming happening in our upper echelons of our wealth society and the power. And folks are starting to realize, I think, more and more that that real power and real, I want to get this word right. I think that folks are arriving at the fact that authentic love, as much as I hate to abuse that word, because that word has just been used and wrung out, but I feel like authentic, unconditional love as a modality is the path to wisdom and the path to elevating frequency and the path to becoming better.
I love it. Yeah.
And that's and everything that I engage in now, I'm holding myself to that. This has to be the why. This has to be the modality,
the filter that everything goes through. For your experiences, anything that you're engaging in.
Yeah, 100%, man.
Yeah. What I like about the path that we've chosen, as it relates to bringing guests in, one, I suppose it's out of necessity because I don't know a lot of movie stars and rock stars and stuff like that. I'm not sure about you.
Couple. I know a couple.
But to your point, it feels like, to me, I mean, there's lots of stuff out there. That's the beauty of the democratization, of being able to do something like this. When you and I were coming up as aspiring musicians, there were very defined gatekeepers, to what got through, right? So one of the benefits now is that anybody can go ahead and work on a creative project, have a podcast, write some songs, get them on iTunes, get them out to podcasts, which is fantastic, right?
Right.
But one of the things I like about our approach is that as I consume more and more of that content, especially in the podcast form, it feels to me like it's becoming another outlet similar to like the late night talk show circuit, where the guests that I find interesting are really there to promote their latest book or their latest movie or their latest record. And I thought, you and I know some fairly interesting people that may not be famous, but have, pretty high emotional intelligence and have had a number of different experiences in their lives and worn a number of different hats and an above average level of mindfulness. And so I thought, I can't necessarily relate to somebody who's on a book tour or promoting their latest gajillion-dollar movie.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that three people who have lived multiple chapters of their lives don't have experiences and points of view to share that are probably arguably more likely to resonate with, I don't want to say average people. I don't really like that term, but let's say a typical listener. So anyway, I just wanted to share that was a big piece of it to me. I don't see our inability to book A-list stars as a negative point.
Sure. Well, can I point something out? I find oftentimes when I'm listening to some of my favorite podcasts, which are some of your favorite podcasts as well, that there's a lot of limitations to what is able to be shared and what gets shared, and there's a distillation to the content in these interviews when there are people who are working with a PR team and working with there's an affectation or there's a contrivity to these interviews anyways that's not what I desire.
Exactly. It just goes back to what you were just saying, the uncanned version of being in the moment and having a genuine conversation rather than something that's, I think you just said, contrived to some degree, right?
Yeah. You and I discussed recently, the idea of moving forward and tearing down or making literal maxims out of some quote, some quotations from the context of lyrics of favorite songs off of favorite records. You know what I mean? And to me, that doing that is taking a layer off of the sheen of some famous person's songwriting and unpacking a single line, a single set of words, and being like, yo, man, where was this guy's head at? Where was his heart at when he used this combination of words, which just continues to, like you say, to paraphrase you, which continues to haunt me. You know what I mean? Like, I've got some of those lines from songs throughout the years that, that I'm just like, man.
And what point of view are we hearing them through now?
Right.
That may be significantly different than the way I experienced that line or that song or that poem or whatever 10, 20, 40 years ago. So I think, there's obviously plenty of fertile ground there. The loose format, I feel like we're going to end up with here with our guests, if we present them with a handful of maxims to choose from, I feel like we can use that pretty minimal outline as a loose guide for the conversations that we're going to have.
Yeah. And then, people listening in have the opportunity to be explorative in their own private minds.
Exactly. And that's my hope for it. That would be amazing.
And one thing I think we should consider doing is an email address for Maxim EQ so that we can invite people to communicate with us. We can invite people to leave comments or to share feelings or thoughts or whatever.
That would be amazing. The benefit of you and I talking is that hopefully we're learning something from each other during the conversation. We bring in a guest, and now I've got 2 additional point of views from which to maybe glean something. Imagine doing it collectively where other people are sharing what their reactions and processing was to these conversations. That would be amazing. It would just make the stew that much richer. I would love that.
Yeah. I think that this is going to be exciting. I think that this is going to be a journey. It's not perfect. I think that it'll evolve. I'm open for evolution and change.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I'm here for. So I just want to get busy and start doing the business of.
Yeah. I hope that we have the opportunity to jump right in and just continue to get better and better at doing it.
Yeah, me too. I look forward to it. Let's just do this. Let's create Maxim EQ. Let's invite people to become part of it, and let's see where it goes.
And we put it out there. We don't own it anymore.
That's right.
It belongs to the receivers, and whatever purpose it serves for them, that's fantastic. If it's of any benefit to anybody in their life, great.
Yeah. I feel a sense of purpose in realizing this and making this happen. I hear the wise words of Bob Marley in my head frequently. The line from Redemption Song, emancipate yourself from mental slavery, because none but ourselves shall free our minds.
Right on. Yeah.
And I feel like I'm ready to be accountable to that. I'm ready to be a soldier for emotional and spiritual emancipation. I'm specifically ready to achieve an elevated level of connectivity with other human beings.
Great.
And to become a better listener, and to become just wiser and a more useful contributor in my little world.
Love it, dude. Love it.